And I'm co-founder of First Responders of Mississippi, and it's our pleasure to have this wonderful speaker coming back for part 2 tonight. Elizabeth Fikes was our presenter last week, and she was her information that she brought was so valid for what is going on today that we asked her to come back for part 2. And I just want to say a couple of things. You know, first responders and healthcare providers have been hit hard in the last 2 weeks, and especially here in the Ridgeland, Madison area, we lost a police officer this week because it was just unnecessary, and we hate to lose first responders. And so one of the reasons we do this is because it's so important. And that's what I want to stress tonight. That's why we do this series. It's 30 minutes. You can come back and view it anytime, day or night, from the Mississippi Nurses Association. And that is why this partnership with First Responders of Mississippi and the Mississippi Nurses Association is so important to us, because we want you to have the resources that you need to continue to be well. So Elizabeth, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Ruth Ann, and thank you guys for inviting me back. It's certainly my honor to be here, and I hope that it was helpful last time, everything that I went over. I am co-founder and director of outreach and communications for Stonewater Adolescent Recovery Center. We are in Oxford, Mississippi, and we are from, my family and I founded it in almost 6 years ago, and we had an experience with my brother when he was 16. We are from Lee County, Tupelo, Mississippi. And, you know, we found out that my brother, as a 16-year-old, had a very serious substance use issue. And by the time that we found out about it, it was quite progressed, and he needed to get treatment quickly. And so we've been through this experience now. It was a little over 18 years ago. We just celebrated over 18 years ago in recovery for my brother. But just as a family, I really remained passionate about being a resource for Mississippi families, for people who are in this healthcare industry, and trying to work with adolescents and also their families. As you guys know, it's something that impacts the entire family system. And so it's really important. What I find more than anything is that a lot of families and caregivers, people in this field, when it comes to adolescents, feel a little bit mystified. You know, there's not as much information available. You know, where do you get it? How do you stay up to date on the trends? And you know, how do you know what's what? And not only are the adolescents today really facing so many issues with substance use and the availability of it, access to it, they're also growing up with screens in their hands, and that has an impact. This is all interwoven. You can't really look at one completely without at least looking at the other. So in part 2 today, I'm just going to give a really quick recap of some of the highlights of things that we went over last week. And then I'm going to touch on just a few other issues, including technology. And what I wanted you to come away with too is not only just information about what this is and how it's impacting everyone, but also some things that you can do, things that you can look for to identify adolescents who might be struggling with some type of addiction, whether it is substance use or technology use, you know, changes in behavior, things to identify that someone may need help. And then also some kind of practical tools, particularly around technology, that whether you are a caregiver or a family member, I hope that you'll find useful. Please, I'm not sure if Ruth Ann went over this, but please use the chat box for any questions that you guys have. We will be looking at those. I think Ruth Ann is going to be kind of monitoring those to make sure that we get all of your questions answered. If I can answer them, I will. And if I can't, then I'm happy to look into it and get back to you guys. And if any of you were here last week and have kind of follow-up questions from any information that you heard last week, please drop those in the chat too, and we'll be happy to go over them. But just a brief overview. Like I said, I'm co-founder of Stonewater Adolescent Recovery Center. We treat only adolescents. So I just tell you that to let you know that that is our expertise. That's our wheelhouse. And we're working with adolescents in a residential setting, from medical detox to about 90 days of a treatment stay. Last week, I'll go back to this. So in terms of a recap, just to hit some of the highlights that we talked about, we really focused last week on marijuana. There's so many, I could spend hours talking about marijuana because there's so many misconceptions with it as it applies to youth. You know, I think our image and idea of marijuana today is shaped as a society by how marijuana affects and sometimes even benefits adults. And regardless of where you stand on adult marijuana use, I just asked people to step away from that and realize that today we're talking about adolescents and how these things impact adolescents specifically. And marijuana use, we talked about all the ways that it impacts adolescents very differently than it impacts adults. Brains are still developing. At one time, you know, researchers and people in the medical field said that brains were developing until the age of 18. And then it was 21. And now they've shown that they're still developing up until the age of 25. So if you think that just because your child or the person that you're caring for has turned 18, now they're going to be less susceptible to the harms of marijuana or other substances because they're an adult, know that they've got 7 more years that their brain is still going to be developing, and they're going to be far more susceptible than an adult to these substances that they're putting in their body. Some of the things that we went over are that, you know, adolescents become addicted to marijuana, and that's a huge myth. We went over some myths and just debunked them, but I think that's a big one, is that they say, you know, you can't get addicted to marijuana. While there haven't been fatal overdoses of marijuana, you can overdose from marijuana. There are lots of emergency room entries every year across the country because of marijuana overdoses. And you can be addicted. We see about 93% of our guys come in, and marijuana for residential treatment is the substance of choice. And they're doing that all day, every day, often. That's not where they start, but a lot of times that's what it becomes, because they have such access in schools and in their everyday activities with the discrete ability to vape. And so that has really been a game changer in terms of access. And we have the guys that come to us at Stonewater often say that it's easier for them to access marijuana than it is for them to drink. So we don't see alcohol as much as the problematic kind of gateway substance that it was before. And the other thing that I hear so often is, yeah, marijuana is so harmful because it's the gateway drug. And I want you to know that marijuana, if they don't ever get past that gateway, if they just hang out at marijuana and never anything more, it is so incredibly harmful because of the potency that is out there these days. I mentioned that about 10 years ago, the average potency of the leaf form of marijuana was about around 10 to 12%. Now average is about 25%. It's actually pretty hard to get it below 30%. That's the leaf form, but the form that they're vaping, the THC content is between 70 to 90%. And a lot of times vaping is the entry point for a lot of these, of this age group with marijuana. So we'll talk a little bit more about some of the that we see physically, behaviorally, emotionally, mentally, when you have young men and women who are using marijuana regularly, and so that you know those things to identify. But those are just a few of the highlights. We have also, I would be remiss in not saying that we also have started seeing in the last year and a half an increasing number of cases of marijuana-induced psychosis and even more recently, marijuana-induced seizures or epilepsy. These are young men who've never had any type of seizures or epileptic behaviors, and then because of the potency of the marijuana, it's kind of tripping their brain, they're having seizures, and then they're having to get on medication for seizures. They're getting denied from treatment because a lot of treatment centers don't want to take on that liability. So it creates even issues for getting help, depending on what your body's response has been. So there's just a lot of scary stuff going on with just marijuana. And I hear that so often from parents, is that we didn't call, or not even just parents, clinicians, doctors, referral sources. We didn't call because we just thought he was using marijuana. And like I said, even if they're just using marijuana today, that is just as dangerous as what we were seeing with other substances, years ago. Additionally, fentanyl and overdoses among teens are massively on the rise. This is a really staggering statistic that overdoses almost doubled from 2020 to 21 in teens, a 94% increase. So that's almost exactly doubled. And I think what you're hearing, what's interesting about that is if you've read any of the statistics around teen substance use during COVID, a lot of those articles are citing some data that actually during COVID, there was a decrease in teen substance use. Not due to anything, but just that they were locked down in their homes, not able to go out and access it. So I don't think that we can get super excited and feel really encouraged about that decrease in substance use when the only reason they can really attribute the reduction is a worldwide pandemic. We can't pat ourselves on the back for that. That's hopefully not going to happen again. And we have to have other tools in place to ensure a reduction in substance use. But nonetheless, they do say that there was a reduction in substance use because of teens being locked down, not a massive reduction, but a small reduction. However, from 2020 to 2021, you had almost double the teen overdose deaths. And what they say is that that is related to the potency and lethal potential of the substances being used, and in large part to fentanyl contamination. 77% of all teen overdose deaths involved fentanyl. I think most of the people in this audience are really aware of how dangerous fentanyl is. You guys see that all the time, but we weren't seeing it as much with adolescents. They were a little bit insulated from it because of the drugs that they were using, but we're seeing a real shift there. And you're seeing more and more adolescents seeking pills, seeking Vicodin, seeking Oxycontin. And what they now estimate is that 1 in 3 pills, counterfeit prescription pills. Of course, this is not referring to something that's bought with a prescription at a pharmacy, but 1/3 of counterfeit pills are contaminated with some degree of fentanyl. So that means, think about that, 1/3, that means 1 out of every 3 pills that's purchased by someone on the street or that's handed to someone at a party, 1 in 3 of those is contaminated with fentanyl, which is potentially lethal. Are we spreading this message? Someone asked a question last week, really, how do we combat this? And I think the first way is really to know this information that I'm sharing today and disseminate it. Make sure everyone that knows this information, because we cannot take this seriously enough. Social media, I had to really blow through a few of these slides last time, but I do just want to let you guys know that it's important, as I bring in the impact of technology too, for you to know that the paper trail of substance use, substance purchases, procuring it is often on the phone of an adolescent. Now, it may be hard to find because there are ways around it being easy to find. And these are usually smart kids and they know all the tricks, I can tell you that. But it's important that we as adults, we as parents, as supervisors, as guardians, as, again, caregivers, know the places to look, because that's going to give us the information that we need as to maybe what's in their system, as to what they've been using regularly. So Snapchat, this is the icon. If you're not familiar with this icon, this is the Snapchat icon. This is, for us right now, the #1 place that we see adolescents, obtaining drugs, and they're doing it. You have for your eyes only parts of Snapchat where you have to have a code. So even adults who are monitoring their child's social media use sometimes may not know that there's kind of a secret part of Snapchat. And what we find is a lot of times after parents have sought treatment at Stonewater, then they go through their child's phone, then they access it, and they find all types of videos where they're engaging in substance use, where their friends, the people that they're around, are engaging in substance use. And I'm frequently shocked at how they don't always remove these from the phone. I think they would kind of delete that paper trail, but sometimes they don't. They leave them there, and people find out about it, but it's too late at that point. So make sure that you're looking there, that you're familiar, that you have codes to every place on the phone. And then, for Instagram, it's the same way. Privacy settings, you can curate your story so that parents don't know that they don't have access to their child's story. So the child is posting things that the parents see, and those are really great things, them at school and with their friends and with the healthy friends and doing the things that they're supposed to do, but they may have a whole other account under a totally different name that their friends have access to. It may not even, the name doesn't resemble anything with their real name. It may not be the same sex, the same, it may just be totally unrelated to their real name. Often it is. And that's the one that their friends follow. That's the one where they're posting the stories of them engaging in things that they wouldn't want any adult in their life usually to see. So something to be aware of. And then, in addition to the things that they might be doing or broadcasting on social media, they are procuring substances. And we went through this directory of emojis where I just explained that there are ways that the adolescents communicate today about drugs without actually saying the name. So you're not going to probably pick up an adolescent's phone and say, hey, do you have any cocaine for sale? I'd like to buy some. Let's meet at the corner. You might just pick up an adolescent's phone and see 10 emojis in a row, and you don't think anything of it. But what it could be, and I'm not saying it always is, but just know that sometimes they communicate in code with these emojis so that parents don't know what they're trying to communicate. Or they might be on Snapchat showing a video of themselves doing something harmless out in their yard, at their home, but they might have one of these things. They might have a plug, and then they might have a snowflake to indicate to anyone who knows the codes that they are looking for cocaine. And that's how they're buying and also selling substances often these days, or marijuana, or whatever it is. The other part about technology is just the impact of technology on the brain. Technology is designed to be addictive in the same way that substances are addictive. It engages, it triggers that dopamine, emitting area of your brain. And they are designed with that in mind. How can we trigger that? And how can we make it so that they need more and more, have to play longer and longer, how they have to level up and level up. All those things are designed to make these games addictive. The gaming lobby spends more money on lobbying each year than the NRA even. That it was a shocking statistic for me. They are investing heavily in an audience that is young, and they can create, addiction to this technology, to gaming, very young. Instagram, Facebook, likes are connected to dopamine receptors in our brain. They are designed, these social media platforms are designed to triggering that so that you become addicted. So in addition to all of the things that you hear about in terms of false reality, we compare ourselves to false reality. We feel less than because we see everyone on their European summer vacations and we're sitting behind our desk. Those things have an impact, and certainly they have an impact on adults, but certainly they have an impact on adolescents as they're comparing themselves to others. So that's social media. And then you have the gaming part of technology, which is really designed also to be addictive. You have now gaming in high schools and universities that is an official sport. And they estimate, people that do this research, that if your child or someone you know is gaming 4 hours a day, they're probably spending the same amount of hours watching someone else game, learning tricks, observing. So that's 8 hours a day right there. You think you see them playing games for 4 hours. Well, they're likely watching another 4 hours. That's 8 hours a day that they are just sitting in front of a screen, watching games. And you may or may not know about that. And gaming disorder has now been recognized as a mental health disorder by the World Health Organization. So this is serious. The other part of gaming that is dangerous is access to strangers. A lot of parents may not realize how easy it is to engage with strangers on gaming platforms. And then I'll transition to also talking about just, websites and apps in general. A lot of these websites and apps are designed so that there's no kind of login info that's required. Someone could pull up the screen and immediately start seeing content that was not designed. They're not having to click and say, this is my email information. It just immediately comes up, and they can also engage with adults, predators, people who are preying on adolescents or children. So it's very important. Again, this can all feel really scary, but it is scary. And what's most important is that and that you're aware. And I can only scrape the surface in this presentation. We're almost out of time already. Again, I can't believe it, but just know that take a deep dive into these things, educate yourselves, and make sure that you're able to provide this information to the families that you guys work with. I want to just quickly go over some signs of struggle. I told you guys I wanted you to leave with some practical information. In terms of the marijuana use, and certainly it can represent other substance use, just be really observant. You often know your family members or the people that you're around. Are you walking on eggshells all the time? Are there big changes in moods? Are they quick to be angry or defensive? And when they get angry, is it totally disproportionate? Did you tell them that they need to wait 10 minutes for dinner, and then all of a sudden it's some crazy meltdown or blow up, or they can't bring their phone to the table, and all of a sudden there's an explosion, and you're seeing someone that's not typical, not in line, consistent with the way this adolescent used to behave? Are you seeing those kinds of irrational behaviors? Less interest, certainly, in what they used to enjoy, time with family, sports, music, any kind of extracurriculars, church, youth group. They used to really enjoy it. Now they don't want to go anymore, and they have excuses. Maybe they complain about They might complain about the youth pastor's content. They don't like the youth pastor anymore. All of a sudden, they don't like the people in their youth group. They have reasons, these adolescents are kind of expert lawyers in creating reasons for all these things to explain why these things exist, why these things have changed. But the reality is there's something more going on when you see this. Isolation, adolescents are designed to want to be a part of something. They want to be a part of a group. Even if an adolescent is very shy and an introvert, they still are just wired developmentally in this stage to want to be a part of a group. And so that doesn't mean they want to be the center of attention. It doesn't mean they want to be the life of the party. It means they want to be a part of a group. So when you see that they're coming in the home and they immediately want to isolate, that's a red flag. That's something that you need to look for and look closer into. Highs and lows, 1 second, you're convinced that they need to get a residential treatment that night. You're scared. And then maybe a few minutes later, the next morning, everything's fine. And they're lovey and sweet and the little angel that you know. Those highs and lows are not normal. Stealing, it doesn't have to be stealing a car. It doesn't have to be stealing, $100. It can be stealing $1. You just start to see things are missing from the home, change, small amounts of money. Certainly look at pill boxes, prescription containers. These are things that need to be locked up. Even if they're not using them themselves, there's sometimes, we hear a lot of adolescents who will have been prescribed a prescription drug for ADHD, for example, and they really don't like the way it makes them feel. They say, we hear this a lot, but even if they don't like that substance, a lot of times they might use it kind of as currency to get something else that they might like. So, look for these things: aggression, punching walls, verbal anger. This is one of the ones that we hear the most, and people don't associate these things that I'm telling you about. People don't associate aggression, belligerence, defiance, spewing meanness at parents with marijuana. But this is what we're seeing. Now, we don't necessarily see it outside the home. So I want to be really clear about that. They may not act this way with teachers. They may not act this way around their doctors, around first responders, around other people. They may in some cases, but often this is something that's really seen in the home. And then, of course, look at pop culture. What are they listening to? Who are they hanging around? Has their friend group changed? Have you seen a decline in grades, or they're not going to school? Changes in how much they eat or sleep? These are all really important things to look for. And then I think I might have skipped over. Oh, for boundaries. So I did want to give you guys some practical tools for boundaries. And I can't take credit for these. There is a program, a residential program in the US. It's in Washington State, that is an incredible program designed only to help teens with technology addictions. And these are what they say. After all the research that they do, we have our expertise around substance use and mental health disorders. They have theirs around technology addictions. And this is what they say. And some of these things are going to sound really extreme to you guys, because you're going to wonder, how could I ever model this in the home, or how could I ever switch to this as a boundary? But this is what they require all of their families to do who are participating in their program. Supervision and monitoring is not an invasion of privacy. You are not invading your child's confidentiality. It is responsible parenting. You've got to do it if you're not doing it. No technology in the bedroom ever, not even TVs. So they say, if you have a TV in your bedroom, if you have a TV in your child's bedroom, get it out. TVs need to be in common areas. There needs to be that boundary that technology is for common areas. Never technology at the dinner table. They need to have some breaks. They need to have punctuated times where there are those boundaries in place, where there's no technology allowed. They have to engage in conversation. They have to learn to be around people and not be looking at their screens the whole time. No headphones while playing games. So this goes back to that kind of stranger danger piece that we talked about with websites and games, is if you are going to allow, your child to play games, technology is a part of this generation, and they don't say no games ever, but they say it has to be on a device with the speaker on so that you can hear what the people that your child is playing with, you can hear their language, you can hear the kinds of things they're saying. That's really important, because a lot of times if they're sitting there with their headphones, maybe nothing's coming out of their mouth, but they're hearing a lot of things that are dangerous, detrimental, not the kind of things that you want your child to be exposed to. And really just model responsible use. It starts with you. And I think we can all say that adolescents use technology too much and they're addicted to their phones, they're too attached. But the reality is that we are too, and so it's really important that we really evaluate, what am I modeling to adolescents around me, and what can I do to better model responsible use. And really, for all of these things, when you have consequences, make sure you follow through and on them. Don't say, if you do this, I'm going to do this, and then kind of constantly move the flag post. If you say that there's a consequence for irresponsible substance use, if there's, I encourage you guys, if you are working with families and they want some practical responses, ask them, are they drug testing randomly their teen? Ask them some of these practical questions. Have you taken away their phone? Have you taken away their car? I'm surprised at how often I go through kind of a list of first response consequences, and families have not implemented those yet. So make sure that you guys, as the ones working with the families, are encouraging them to take some practical responses. So I'm sorry, I know I've already gone over a little bit and we haven't even had any questions. So Ruth Ann, I'll just follow your lead.
Thank you, Elizabeth. We do have some questions if you have just a moment.
Yeah, I do.
What are the first steps for parents when they see some of these signs? Like, you brought up some really great points when they become defiant, when they start back talking their parents, slamming doors, putting holes in the walls. What are some of the signs, or the first steps that they need to take?
I would say just a bias to action. Don't wait. It is so important. You have such an opportunity as parents and as caregivers, as family members, to make an impact if you intervene early. So what we see more often than not, and honestly, what our family did was we looked at that behavior for a long time and said, oh, he's just a teenage boy. This is just what being a teenager must look like. He's going through a phase. Oh, it's because he just got on this ADHD medicine, and I think this is a reaction to the medicine, and kind of explained it away instead of really just taking action and saying, I'm going to get him an appointment with an adolescent therapist who he can talk to, and who can help talk to us as a family about what's going on and what to identify.
Another question that we have is, drug abuse the number one problem for teens? And if so, what are the secondary addictions they see? Alcohol, gaming, and other. Well, you mentioned a lot about technology. I mean, that's just become critical.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of times we have to tell parents that we'll be the ones to kind of break the message that they're not going to get to have their cell phones in treatment, because they're terrified to tell their child that they can't have their cell phones. And so we just say, okay, we'll communicate that message for you. But I don't know that I can say number one, because you can look at number one in a lot of different ways. What's most common, what's most dangerous. But I would say that what I've seen the biggest increase in the last few months, and what we get calls for, is fentanyl related fentanyl related substance use, that just is on the rise. For a long time, marijuana has been the most prevalent for us.
Yeah.
But I would say also self-harm. I think I didn't mention that in this presentation. I could do a whole other presentation just on that, but self-harm among adolescents is really, really on the rise. And there are a lot of times they are doing this on Snapchat, on TikTok.
Yeah.
They're creating challenges around it where they're actually almost self-harming to be cool. Or there was a take 40 Benadryl challenge, and then TikTok video yourself what happens. So this kind of peer behavior.
And you bring up an interesting point. And, for our audience, if you have a certain topic that you'd like to see us bring to the Thriving series, excuse me, because it is serious, but please get in touch with Teresa or Dana of the Mississippi Nurses Association, and we'll get that topic taken care of. I just can't thank you enough, Elizabeth. You've been outstanding these last 2 weeks, and you have just
thank you.
real.
I hope it's been helpful.
It's really been a great help, because I've learned some things, and I've been doing this a very long time, working in behavioral health and addiction medicine. And I just really appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us. So thank you. And everybody have a good night.
Yeah. Thank y'all for everything you do.
Okay. Bye now.
Bye.